Good morning, my little Sunday morning littles. I hope you're doing well today. Miss Michelle has completed the last little lesson on Joseph, and so I'm excited for you to get to hear this. We're going to go ahead and wrap up Joseph today, and hopefully next Sunday we can start on something a little bit different in our lessons in our class. But I'm excited for you to see how Joseph's story turns out. So the title today is I Am Your Brother Joseph. And this comes from Genesis 45, 46, and 47. So there's 3 chapters in Genesis that this comes from. All right. And if you remember in our last lesson, Benjamin had been accused of being a thief, if you remember that. And we were going to tune in to see what happened to him, to see what kind of fate there was for Joseph's brother Benjamin. So when we open up this lesson, we're going to see the cup again in the bag of grain. And it says in that lesson last week, Benjamin had been accused of being a thief. Joseph's silver cup had ended up in Benjamin's bag of grain. We know Benjamin wasn't a thief, but we're going to see exactly why the cup was placed there. And if you remember in our lesson from last week, the cup was placed in there by the stewards of Joseph, and he told them to. Then he told them to hunt and follow Joseph's brothers down and hunt them down or follow them and open up the bags to see what was in it. And of course, when they did, they found the silver cup. And so they're taking the brothers back to Joseph because Joseph is wanting it to happen this way, but they're thinking that they're going to be in really big trouble this time, and they have no idea how that cup got there, right? So they take them all back, and Joseph begins to tell the brothers that Benjamin will need to stay in the land of Egypt because he has stolen the cup. His brothers were extremely upset because now their father, Jacob, will be bereaved again. He is losing another son, and he's going to be very upset. We know that he's a very old man. We know that he had a very hard time when he thought he had lost Joseph, and he still thinks that, and so he's going to have a really hard time if Benjamin doesn't come back home. Remember that? Now Judah, one of Joseph's older brothers, begins to beg for Benjamin's life, and he tells Joseph that their father is still alive, but if they have to go home without Benjamin, then the grief and sorrow of losing another son will cause their father to die. He is very old, and he may not make it through another tragedy like that. Judah offers to be a slave to Joseph if he will just spare Benjamin's life. And if you remember from the beginning of this story, Judah was one of the brothers that was, of course, in on putting Joseph down into the pit. Now, he didn't want any bloodshed, but he was all for that at that time. And Judah knows what that did to his father Jacob. And he knows what it's going to do if he doesn't bring Benjamin back home. And before he left with Benjamin this last time, he told Jacob that if Benjamin did not come home, that he would be held responsible for that. And so Judah is now begging, just let me stay here and be your slave, but don't make Benjamin stay, because it will really probably do our father in. He probably won't live if that happens. Okay? So Joseph, realizing all this, had to go in private and just weep and cry. He was so upset. He was happy that he knew his father was still alive, but it grieved him so to think that he would hurt his father like that if Benjamin ended up having to stay with him. And he was overwhelmed as well, too, because he had saw the plan that God had throughout his life. And he sees the reason for the highs and the lows in his life. God has put Joseph where he really needed him all along, and he needed him to be able to take care of his family. He did. So Joseph just had to go away and cry for a little while. He really did. When he had that cry, he came back out, and he returned to his brothers, and he finally revealed himself to them. He said, "It is I, Joseph, your brother, and I'm the one you sold into slavery. I am not dead. I am your brother Joseph, alive and well. And so he reveals himself to his brothers. He says, look, it's me. You put me down in that pit. You sold me into slavery. I didn't die. I'm alive. I'm here. And Joseph's brothers could hardly believe what had happened. Joseph was not upset with them, and he tries to help them understand that what they did to him was all part of God's big plan for such a time as this. He was able to provide for his whole family through the famine, and that was God's plan for him. That was what God wanted for him. Now, the one thing that Joseph asked of his brothers is to go and get his father so that he and all of Joseph's family can come and dwell in the land of Egypt with Joseph. He will provide all they need when they get there. The Pharaoh, and we know who Pharaoh is, he is just like, Joseph's like just in second in command to Pharaoh. He is the ruler. He even wanted Joseph's family to take his wagons all the way back to their homeland just so they could bring their family, their wives and their children and everyone down. When the brothers returned to their father and tell Jacob all about this and let him know that his youngest son Joseph is really alive, Jacob, he can't hardly believe it. He's so happy. He and his family are going to prepare to go down to Egypt. Now remember, Jacob is very old. And they don't have cars, they don't have trains, they don't have planes, of course. The ride or the journey down there is going to be hard on him. But, all these years he's thought that his son was dead. And now he's getting the opportunity to go and see his son. His son's not dead. Yeah. Okay. Jacob was an old man when he made the journey into Egypt, and he was going to be with his favorite son, Joseph. When he saw him, he fell upon his son, and his son fell upon him, and they both wept tears of joy when they saw each other. Jacob had spent many of his years in sorrow because he believed that Joseph was dead. But that was not really how things were. God had placed Joseph in the right place to save his entire family, and he gave Jacob the chance to be reunited with Joseph before he died. So, from the very start, God had this plan. And this plan was to end like this. Joseph was going to be ruler in Egypt, second only to Pharaoh. And he was going to have the ability to save his family from that famine. He was going to keep his family from starving to death. And that was all God's plan. And in the end, it all worked out, of course, because before Jacob died, he got to realize and see and live with his favorite son, Joseph, that he had thought was dead forever. Yeah, pretty cool. Okay. Now, Joseph's family was given the land of Goshen to dwell in when they settled in Egypt. They always had plenty, and they were well taken care of. Jacob lived another 17 years in Egypt and dwelt with all of his sons there. When he died, Joseph and his brothers took Jacob back and buried him in the native homeland. God had a plan for Joseph, and he has one for me and you too. Now, we probably don't think about the plan in our life lasting as long as this has, because we've really gone through a long period of time with these lessons. We started out when Joseph was just young, and he would dream dreams, and he would also tell things to his father about his brothers, and his brothers got really, really mad at him over that. They got so mad at him that they almost really just hated him so much that they were going to kill him. And that's when they hatched the plan to throw him in the pit, of course. And they threw him in that pit, and that's when he was sold into slavery, if you remember all that. So that was kind of a low in Joseph's life. But when he was sold into slavery, if you remember, he was sold to Potiphar, the official of royalty. And so he went to live in a royal house. And so that's kind of high. And when he got there, well, Potiphar made him ruler over all the things of his household. So if you remember, everywhere Joseph got put, even if it was a bad place or even if it was a low in his life, he ended up being in control or managing things. But it wasn't really Joseph that put himself there. It was God that put Joseph there. Yeah, that's the plan that God had for him. And so all down through his life, things like that happened. And when it came right down to the very, very end, his family was going to perish. They were going to die. And many people in that land were going to die because of that famine. And he had interpreted Pharaoh's dream. He knew all along what was going to happen. God had revealed that to him, and he interpreted that dream for Pharaoh. And he was in a place of authority, and he could really, really stand in and help his family. And that's what he did. That's what he did. And for his brothers to have treated him so unfairly and so mean, he still was wanting to make sure that they stayed alive and they had the food that they needed to eat. And the one thing that he wanted so bad was to get to see his father before his father died. And he got to. Jacob even lived in this land with Joseph and all of his brothers for 17 more years after he made that long journey, even though he was very, very old when that happened. The Lord allowed him to live another 17 years with with Joseph and his brothers and their family there in Egypt. So, God works everything out, all according to his plan, not ours. And, I look back at my life, and I'm a whole lot older than you are, littles, but I can see how God had a hand in in everything that happened in my life. And it was hard for me to see at the time, but now I see it. And, older people older than you would tell you that. And so some days you may have a bad day as a little. You might have a really stinky, no good, rotten day. And you know what? It's going to get better. It is. And God's in control of all that. He really is. So things aren't always going to be bad because there's highs and lows. And if you put your trust in him, just like Joseph did, then it's all going to work out in the end. It really is. Joseph was a very good leader and a very good ruler. And he went and worked through the things that happened in his life, all because he knew God was going to take care of him. And God's the one that had the hand in it. And he knew that. So he was very submissive to what God wanted him to do, and this is how it all worked out for him. Now, I love this story of Jacob and Joseph. I love it. It causes us to really think, can we live our lives like that? Can we be kind to our brothers and sisters even when they don't do nice things to us? Can we be kind to anyone even when they don't do the right thing to us? That's a hard thing to do, littles, especially at your age. So I want you to think about the things that we've talked about in this lesson of Joseph. In the end, Joseph held nothing against his brothers, and he helped save them from the famine. Okay? I want you to think if you could really do that. If someone really, really did something to you, would it be hard to love them back that much? It is for me too. But with God's help, we can. We can. So I want you to think about this lesson. We'll probably have to go back through it when we get back in our building because we didn't get to make any crafts or we didn't get to do any of the fun stuff like that. But until we get back in that building, I'll be seeing you here, doing some lessons with you and trying to stay in contact with you through this time. I believe there's going to come a day we'll be back and we'll get to do some really fun crafts with a lot of these lessons that we've learned while we've been virtual like this. But my prayer for you is that you stay happy and healthy and that you can be just like Joseph. You can love your enemies regardless of what they do to you, okay? And when you have a bad day, you're going to have to learn that it doesn't last forever, all right? I really love you a lot, littles, and I hope to see you soon. I hope you have a great, great week, and I'll see you next week.